So, I recently completed a checkpointless run of Shovel Knight. Not the most adverse challenge the game has to offer, but one that certainly had me deep in its clutches nonetheless. I found that suffering such a huge penalty for dying encouraged me to experiment with the various relics available in the game way more than I otherwise would have. And as such, I decided to make a video ranking them all from my least to most favourite, taking into account a mix of legitimate effectiveness as well as sheer personal preference. Please enjoy. The mobile gear is a throwable relic which creates a platform you can stand on, at which point it will begin moving forwards, running over enemies and hopping between gaps until it hits a wall, bringing it to a stop and giving you a brief opportunity to leap to more stable ground before it disappears. Working as both a mobility and combat relic, you'd think such a wealth of utility would make it excellent, but it's the mobile aspect of the mobile gear that I've always struggled to get to grips with. Shovel Knight is a game where bottomless pits are commonplace. You spend the whole game refining your understanding of Shovel Knight's jumping gravity so you can overcome these hazards. I'd rather not place the responsibility of that platforming in the hands of the mobile gear's little hops. And while the gear's ability to instantly kill most small enemies by running them over is very efficient, provided you're riding it at the same time, if you aren't, other relics can easily do the same thing while keeping you at much safer distances. The Dust Knuckles are the most melee-oriented relic in the game, which is a bit of a problem because Shovel Knight specialises in melee combat anyway, but regardless, they're unique in the fact that, upon colliding with either a destructible block or an enemy, Shovel Knight will dash forwards a short distance and completely ignore gravity, allowing him to fly provided there's a long enough row of things to punch. As you can imagine, this scenario is incredibly niche. It's one of those tools where you can really tell when you're supposed to use it, and beyond those designated points, it really doesn't have much utility. To add insult to injury, it only does one shovel strike worth of damage per swing, and since it displaces you on hit, you'll usually end up dashing into damage if you're attacking any enemy with more than the minimum amount of HP, making it practically useless in straight-up combat. The fishing rod is a bit of an outlier in that it's all about resource gathering. You can use bottomless pits to fish up health, gold, and ichor, all of which are really useful supplements towards both your completion of the current stage and your adventure as a whole. Beyond that, it's actually quite effective at eliminating enemies directly below you too, boasting a surprising amount of damage, and it's the premier method of recovering your gold bags from hard to reach spots without using yellow ichor. It may not be the flashiest tool in your arsenal, but the benefits it provides throughout the entire game by doing something nothing else can is undeniable. As the Chaos Sphere's description suggests, all of this relic's power lies squarely in its potential. It's a bouncing orb projectile which can hit multiple enemies multiple times with rapid low damage blows, but it's incredibly dependent on both the environment and the enemy's movements. If you get unlucky and the orb manages to circumvent everything but the bottomless pit it's just plummeted into, then it's a complete waste, but on the contrary, if it manages to channel its inner heat-seeking missile and hit a boss 4 times, then it's great. But its inconsistency usually makes it a hard pass for me when I'm weighing up which relic to use for any given scenario. Speaking of consistency, a relic that does a much better job of it is the Alchemy Coin. Though its main use is framed as it being a money generator, it's actually a really strong projectile in its own right. Shovel Knight throws it down directly in front of him and it travels across the ground, destroying small enemies and bouncing off of stronger ones until it collides with a wall, at which point it disappears. If you want to stop that from happening, you can also help it travel vertically by striking it with your shovel, which will cause it to hop at short distance. I see the Alchemy Coin as a kind of parallel to the mobile gear. When you use the coin, you're sacrificing the automated movement of the gear for a faster use time and some extra cash. So between the two ground-hitting, high-damage projectile relics, it really ends up being a matter of preference. The Warhorn is the most indisputably powerful relic in Shovel Knight. It deals a huge amount of damage in an equally huge radius, making it ideal for clearing out groups of enemies or taking out enemies in hard to reach places. Its only limiting factor is a significant one though. It costs 20 mana to use. Assuming you aren't using the Conjurer's Coat, which reduces your defenses in exchange for mana, you'll only have 100 mana, or 5 uses of the horn to work with before you'll need to replenish it. 5 uses may sound like a lot, but not every encounter is going to be able to leverage the full extent of the horn's power, and as such I find it taking a more reserved role in my arsenal, only used for specific enemies which I know I'd rather blow away than deal with conventionally. While raw power may sound great on paper, efficiency is an equally as important factor in deciding what to use to tackle a situation. Straightforward and cheap to use, the Flare Wand is the simplest projectile relic in the game. It fires a single small projectile directly in front of you. No setup, gravity, or bouncing to worry about, just point and shoot. This extreme level of ease does come at the cost of damage, but considering how easy and mana efficient it is to consistently land hits with this thing, that concern is quickly offset. It also excels at destroying enemy projectiles, which, when combined with its spammability, makes bursting down casters in tough spots a breeze. A simple solution to simple problems, and some more complex ones too. Straightforward may be cool, but if you ask me, subversive is better. Enter the Throwing Anchor, a projectile which, while it may seem cumbersome and awkward to use at first with its, for a lack of a better word, arcing throwing arc, possesses 2 properties which make it my pick for the very best in the game. Firstly, it completely ignores solid objects, and can't be stopped by anything. It effectively exists on a layer above the rest of the stage, meaning that, provided you aim it properly, neither walls nor enemies will stop its pursuit of destruction. And because it pierces all blocking properties, it's guaranteed to damage whatever you throw it at. Throw in a dash of the fact that vertical combat solutions are relatively rare in Shovel Knight, and it's clear to see that the Throwing Anchor is truly indispensable. Despite their individual intricacies, in most situations, the Flare Wand can be an effective replacement for every projectile in the game. Every projectile except the Throwing Anchor. The Troupple Chalice may be the only entirely dedicated support relic in the game. Even the fishing rod can kill things if it needs to, but considering how powerful it is, you really don't need anything else. Each chalice, of which you have 2, can be filled with one of 3 choices of ichor. The yellow ichor of Fortune, for example, causes any and all forms of gold to magnetize towards you. Excellent for recovering gold bags after you died in a particularly precarious position. Unfortunately for the yellow ichor, this effect unequivocally pales in comparison to the capabilities of the blue and red variants, each able to bestow you with absolutely game-breaking effects, such as 10 full seconds of invincibility for the blue ichor of Boldness, and a complete restoration of both your health and mana in the case of the red ichor of Renewal. Keeping 1 or 2 of these on hand makes any boss fight in the game a bit of a joke, and while you may find it difficult to resist using them throughout the stage instead of saving them for the final encounter, you can easily use glowing fishing spots to reel in some extra juice, which is cool because it encourages you to use them, but also a little questionable because they're absolutely busted. The Phase Locket makes you completely invincible. No strings attached. No detrimental side effect that'll stab you in the back later, no significant mana cost like the Warhorn, and pretty much no thought required. The Locket effectively gives you invincibility frames for a short time if you'd been hit, Not literally for a few frames, like a parry or a risky dodge. It's more like a few seconds. Time where you're free to do whatever you like and be completely impervious to anything short of a bottomless pit. And even then, with a little ingenuity, you can use the Phase Locket's quirk of freezing Shovel Knight in places it's used to circumvent those too. Enemies, spikes, and even bosses are no match for this relic. And while the aforementioned chalices may specialise for the most part in sustaining you after you take some damage, or even die, being able to evade that damage in the first place, pretty much whenever you want, is a deal even sweeter. Sure, we've had an instrument so powerful it destroys everything that hears it, an anchor that seemingly defies the dimensional integrity of the world, and an array of beverages so potent they practically break the game. But do any of these allegedly exceptional relics allow you to fly? No, I didn't think so. The Propeller Dagger is my absolute favourite relic in Shovel Knight because it's the only one that truly expands your movement capabilities in an unrestricted and freeing fashion. You don't need something to punch like the Dust Knuckles. You don't need to set up and plan a route for your mobile gear. You can just go whenever you want. An air dash adds so much to your platforming abilities. It allows you to feel confident in taking so many more risks, and using it consistently speeds up the way you play the game without you even realising. No longer are you shackled to your fears of falling into bottomless pits or hordes of enemies. The Propeller Dagger gives you the instant safety net you need to be more brazen and dive into the challenge, constantly finding new platforming and enemy skips to glide through the game with a renewed vigour. So what if it's not great for attacking enemies? Shovel Knight is a platformer, and to me, the tool that enhances said platforming so fervently is the one that you should keep closest to your chest. So, that's my list. Thanks for checking it out, but don't leave just yet. I've got one final surprise for you. Shovel Knight turns 10 next year,